Well, good evening. We're going to have some fun tonight, I hope. I've got a series of stories to tell you about values and culture in business. Some of those are success stories. Some of those are miserable failures. And I'm also going to ask, if we have time at the end, whether we've got any acting talent in the room, because I'd really like to do a role play. It's a role play about recruiting to values. And thank you, yes. And if there's anybody who feels as if they've got a little bit of acting talent, I look for a gender balance, so 2 people, that would be really appreciated. So you've just got time to think about that before we go in. And the title of this, The Idea of Values, is a New Frontier for Business. It's taken from a quote from the Director General of the Institute of Directors. And it's talking through that I will be. I'm talking in ahead of World Values Day, which is on October the 19th coming up. Here we go. So values, let's start with values. I'm going to start with a familiar figure. And the Rivonia trial was when Nelson Mandela and colleagues were put on treason trial. And you can find a recording of that trial up on YouTube or online. And it's actually very moving because we're used to a world of selfies and recording. I think I'm being recorded right now, whereas this is a sole single microphone in a 1960s courtroom in apartheid South Africa, with those accused fully believing that they would be found guilty, and if found guilty, that they would be executed. And it's worth a listen to, and you can hear Nelson Mandela speak, and in that he says these words, which are celebrated and quite well known. He talks about these things being ideals that for which I'm hope to live for and to achieve, but if needs be, it's an ideal for which I'm prepared to die. And in this, he names at least 4 values that he holds: democracy, freedom, harmony, and equality. So this is by way of introducing what values are. And the Oxford English Dictionary, this is what I was given by my grandmother when I got my degree. It was like that in days. We had physical dictionaries. And actually, I've noticed that she'd be rather cross with me because I underlined the word values before thinking, hold on, she really wouldn't have appreciated that. But values are, according to the OED, principles or standards of behavior. One's judgment is about what is important in life. So values may therefore be very kind of varied, but they are about the fundamental motivation, and that's why they matter in business, because if you understand people's fundamental motivation, whether it's as a customer or an employee or a supplier, you're getting somewhere deeper than the usual field of contract and transaction. And these drawings, I have to say, were done by my son, Frankie. But this was a go at the theory of self-determination out of psychology, which is a way of thinking about values. I thought if I'm coming to Salford University, the business school, I needed to have a little bit of theory in here. So this is the little bit of theory that we have. And it's the idea of separating out extrinsic motivation from intrinsic motivation. And the carrot and the stick are both economists would call incentives. Incentives aren't necessarily positive, they can be negative as well. If I hit you, sir, that's an incentive according to economics. That says more about economics than you or me, but let's see how we go. We're going to be best of friends. Carrot or stick are external incentives, extrinsic motivation. And what I call the rose, perhaps something of beauty, is something that you might care about in and of itself. And values fall into that category, or many of them do, not all of them do. And what you'll find in business is that for a long time, pay, compensation, reward, performance management was all in the area of extrinsic motivations. Do we have bigger carrots if you're a chief exec, or do we have bigger stick if you're a store worker? And now the field is moving more towards culture and values, and that sense of sometimes called employee engagement. How do people see themselves, see their purpose fulfilled in the work that they do and the business that they work for? I said values, some of those are intrinsic, some of those are extrinsic, and this is a nice one, so the internal ones, and these are just examples of dignity, curiosity, intrinsic values. Extrinsic values are those where you are comparing yourself to the world around you. So social status, for example, or power, are also examples of values. And the thing to take out of this is that not all values are ethical values. If we don't like what's going on in business, actually it may be because they're the wrong values in play. Every business, every organization is values-based. It's just they may not be the values that you happen to like. Values come out of teamwork. Joshua Green has got a fabulous job title of a professor of moral cognition. And what that means is he deals with the traditional field of ethics, but he wires up people and sees what happens to their brains when they make ethical judgment. And his argument, the values are part of and core to communication and collaboration, working together as a group, sometimes even at personal costs. James Q. Wilson, another author who's written on this, also reminds us that values aren't just what they bring us together, they can be what divide us as well, and arguments around values and can quickly turn into conflict or fights. This is all the field of values, if you like. And now to bring it, that's a quote from Simon Walker, Institute of Directors that I mentioned. Now to bring it a little bit into the stories that I wanted to tell you. And I'm going to use quite a simple framework for this. It's probably like every framework that's ever been presented in any business school ever. You just change the x-axis, you change the y-axis. You've got a top right-hand quadrant, which is where the cash cows or the good things happen. So I hope this is familiar, at least if you have an involvement with the business school. But essentially, this is to take an axis of values that are shared or not shared. So the extent to which there is an alignment within the business around a common set of values. You don't always want exactly the same values. You don't want your marketing department to have the same values as your internal audit or finance department. There's always going to be a mix that is there. Some of that will reflect kind of professional values as well. But the extent to which they're shared or not, and then the extent to which they're coherent, they fit the competitive situation, the marketplace, the environment within which a business will operate, or the extent to which they are incoherent. And those things can flip and change quite often over time. So that's the framework that I'm going to use. I wanted to start off by asking whether you recognize this. And this is a 64-page booklet called the Enron Code of Ethics. I think you can buy it on eBay, although every time I say that, I think it drives the price up a little bit. That's reflexivity for you. Enron, the energy company, commodities giant, US, went bust in 2001 in a scandal of financial misreporting. And in its booklet, one of the values was integrity. We work with customers and prospects openly, honestly, and sincerely. So it didn't quite happen like that. I always find it funny that business integrity is, I think, the most commonly cited values. Most listed companies now have statements of values. And for many of them, they remain as that, something on the wall. Integrity, I think, or honesty is the most commonly cited value. But I'm never quite sure about that. It's a bit like turning up to a party with a T-shirt saying, "I don't kick dogs." I don't rob grandmothers. It's kind of, we should be expecting businesses to behave honestly. But I don't know, banks are particularly keen on honesty as a value, at least since 2007, which is interesting. So, our case studies, here we come to them. Tradecraft, which kept my family in recycled toilet paper when I was young, is a Newcastle-based fair trade company, founded in 1979. And by 1992, the board directors were sitting around a table asking themselves, how are we doing as a business? They knew what their product range were, they knew what their sales were, they knew what their balance sheet kind of was, but they didn't know how they were performing against mission, because their mission was an unusual one. Tradecraft was founded as a Christian company, and their mission was to promote love and justice in the world's trading system. So Tradecraft turned to myself and colleagues, Simon Zadek in particular, from the New Economics Foundation, where I worked in those days, and said, how do we measure this? How do we know how we are doing as a business, if that is our purpose? And we developed a model then called social auditing. It became triple bottom line accounting. And essentially it involved working with and identifying the stakeholders of the business to identify what mattered to them, what values mattered to them, how did they believe the company was doing in relation to its own core purpose or core values. And what we found, as always, when you go out to ask people, is that people say different things to what you would first have thought. So we went to, not myself, but colleagues, to producer cooperatives in the Philippines. And at this time, Tradecraft were flooding church halls across the country with crafts and produce from developing country producer cooperatives. And Tradecraft assumed that what mattered most to those businesses in the Philippines was what price they were getting, what margin they were getting compared to where else they could get from. In reality, actually, they found that that wasn't what producers were most interested in. What they were more interested in was market information, the way that trends are going to help them look at products and to take some control of their own future about the way that the business was developing. So what emerged out of that? Tradecraft changed its mission statement. It kept those values as part of its vision, but it developed a far more articulate kind of mission, which is down the bottom here, and it was one that was kind of measurable about how it was doing as a business. Measurement isn't everything, but it does help to have some idea of how you are doing, and this mission made it clearer to it. So on our chart, we see it moving from a less shared and less coherent view to a more top right quadrant. Values in that sense can create alignment. And while Tradecraft was aligned in terms of its directors, its staff, some of its volunteer sales reps, actually it hadn't got producers and others fully on board. And that dialogue helped them to create that more of that alignment. Second case study, Barclays. I did say that not everything would be entirely positive. And I'm delighted to say that I'm aware that there are people who have worked for Barclays in the room, so those people are welcome to come up and kick me afterwards. Here's the story. In 2012, Barclays was fined for its role in manipulating the LIBOR interest rate. A guy called Anthony Jenkins was hired as the new CEO, coming in to focus on culture and values. And he commissioned a review, £15 million review, from a professor called Professor Anthony Saltz. And Saltz concluded that Barclays should kind of manage values as if it was another part of the performance management system. It should set targets for improvement, monitor against them, and then head down that line. Now, there are limits to that model, but I won't go into that because these are short vignettes and stories. The thing is, and the trouble is, that changing values takes longer. It takes a long time, and you have to be consistent about it. The old saying is, business doesn't have a culture, business is a culture. So change processes are not easy. And in particular, chief executives, no surprise here, change faster than corporate values. So by 2015, actually the board of Barclays decided that actually they'd had enough of this. kind of leadership, and they wanted to do something different called return on capital. So the new executive chairman, John McFarlane, came in. He said that Anthony Jenkins was good at executing what he'd been asked to do, but it wasn't what they wanted to do kind of now. So he left, and actually later in 2015, Barclays was one of 6 global banks that was fined $5.5 billion for rigging the foreign exchange markets. Barclays had resisted the regulatory action all the way through. Foreign exchange traders had used chat rooms with names such as the cartel to influence the value of major currencies. One comment was, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So Barclays had moved in some ways backwards from this sort of stop-start kind of idea of what it is there to do. The values program, by the way, continues at Barclays. How much chances you would give of success, I don't know. So here's another story, BuildABear. And I love BuildABear, actually, for their approach to values. Actually, the company got into trouble in 2013, and the incoming chief exec, Sharon John, said, the one thing I didn't want to change was the company's values, because that was who we are and what we do. These are life values as well as company values. They're unifying for our organization. But she ran a change program that was based more rootedly on those values. But their values are fabulous. They include ones like collaborate, got it? Celebrate. And the last one to come in, actually, was diversity. And actually, the company has been named as one of the top 10 US companies on diversity, probably the top one on diversity as well. But something about catching imagination, bringing values to life. Relex, the kind of global publishing firm, Footsie top 100 companies, one of its values, which I like, is boundarylessness. And that might be doing some damage to the English language, but it makes you think. And for a publisher of academic journals, as you can imagine, boundarylessness is actually quite challenging, but core to the success of the business as a whole. Now, my next example is Nokia. And the Nokia story, probably quite well known. I'm sure it's a case study, perhaps at the business school. In 2006, Nokia operated in 150 countries. It had 117,000 employees around the world called Nokians. And at that time, it decided to start a process to refresh the company values. And to be honest, this was an amazing program that they run. Very creative, using technology. They use world cafes, participative approaches around the world. They had video blogs that logged 30,000 visits. They had a photo contest to kind of, to draw up the values. And 4 values emerged from that. Achieving together, engaging you, passion for innovation, and very human. So this was an exemplary process, but with one fatal flaw, which is that Nokia had actually sidestepped the key challenges that the culture of the company faced, one of which was a competition between silos, and the second was a low focus on a rapidly changing external market, an external environment. And the chief exec at the time, Olli-Pekka Kalasvuo, now says that it was inappropriate values that brought Nokia down. As a couple of business professors say, just honesty would have saved Nokia, because by 2007, Nokia had half the global market share for mobile phones, and it is now still around, but also ran in the smartphone kind of market. Just telling the truth alone could have saved Nokia's fortunes. That internal competition, creating an introverted culture at a time when it wasn't right. And I call this the values fit. And it's very easy to romanticize traditional values or the values that you were founded with. But if the world has moved on, actually you need to move on kind of with that as well. So coming out of those stories, I've got one more to do. Hold on. I'll do this very briefly. This is my last story, and it's a cooperative. I run a business association for cooperatives, businesses that are owned by people that are involved in the business. Started here in the northwest, and I think we've got a kind of proud and long link with the university here. Summa is the largest equal wage employer in Europe. Not all co-ops are equal wages by any means, but Summa, which is owned by its workforce, is. And it's an extraordinarily democratic business. And they've got 3 areas of work. One on it's a wholesaler, essentially, of whole foods. One area of work is on the forklift trucks and in the depot. One area of work is in the office, doing marketing or the like. And one area is driving trucks out for delivery. And you have to work in 2 of those 3 areas. They don't recruit people for particular jobs. They recruit members, people with the values and cultures to be able to contribute, people that will take personal responsibility. Summa says it's easier to train a member to be a financial accountant than it is to recruit a financial accountant and assume that they're going to be a good kind of member. They won a Queen's Award for Enterprise just recently. These are the 7 cooperative principles. And at the moment, they are flying high. The return on capital on Summa is fantastic. It's well above John Lewis, which is another employee-owned cooperative. So they do pretty well out of the focus and business that they have. One of the areas I love is that equality is one of their values. And so they have been a leader in terms of tackling gender equality in an industry actually which suffers from both inequality and lots of stereotypes. So they've been doing work to tackle unconscious bias, for example, around gender equality. So simple little things is when they recruit, using imagery of women driving the forklift trucks or the lorries or the like, just thinking hard about the processes that are at work in order to achieve equality. And of course, the truth is that you never fully achieve something like equality, and that's, the value of kind of values. And Canadian professor Ian McPherson said that creates a special kind of entrepreneurship that you'll associate with cooperatives, for example, that is an entrepreneurship to try and achieve those values because they are, to some extent, unreachable. You can never get to full equality. So values where they work can be like a northbound train, everybody on side and everybody focused in the same direction. I have to add, as a qualification and health warning, that cooperatives are probably the worst model of business where you don't have everybody on board and facing in the same direction. Where you get conflict, everybody feels a sense of entitlement, things can go badly wrong. A lot of our work is therefore around culture, participation, governance, in order to make that culture kind of really kind of work. And you can get, this is an innovation, the fair tax mark. Don't know if you've come across it, but it's a mark for businesses that pay their legitimate share of tax. It's about tax transparency, really, if you want to get technical. Started by co-ops, mid-counties, phone co-op, and others, now been taken up by international companies, Scottish and Southern, Utility, Lush, across border. So the fair tax mark. I'm not going to do this, just to say that values are not limited to co-ops or to those larger companies that I've talked about. 1 in 4 people who start a business worldwide, according to Rebecca Harding, one of the co-authors of the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, are values-led. And so values are core to why they go into business, why they do what they want to do. But I think I promised you 2 things. Promised you a role play. I hope you're thinking about that. Thank you very much indeed. 5 things I've learned, because it's good to talk about the good stuff, but here's 5 ways to wreck your corporate culture. First is pay lip service, but you reward senior staff with bonuses and shares whether or not things really improve. Second is to paper over the failings by kind of publishing a wish list of ideal corporate values, but that actually contribute to the practice. The third is to let leaders behave or misbehave as they wish, but to police staff, frontline staff, by kind of issuing numerous and prolix manuals, policies and directives about how they should kind of behave, smiling at customers and the like. You see this in Marks and Spencer's, they're really nice people who work on the till, but they've got a script as to what they can do, and you don't half feel sorry for them half of the times. They can't really be who they are. Their behavior, emotional behavior, their inner life is being policed by large corporate kind of businesses. Fourth is to choose a new leader who doesn't understand the values. That's a very common one. Come in, make decisions without really understanding the impact on corporate culture. Financial Reporting Council, again, encouraging boards of companies to understand the culture of businesses, not something that has been on the traditional boardroom matrices. And the final one is to kind of fail to live up to your values. And once you do that, once you've gone wrong, then people will not listen to you kind of further. I'm going to skip this. I'm going to skip the interesting area of values tools that you can use to survey values. There are ways of doing it. They've got their strengths and they've got their kind of limitations that are there. I'm going to skip this, which is a map of values developed by Professor Shalom Schwartz. So there is a peer-reviewed, academically robust way of assessing values in this and cultures right around the world. The World Values Survey, European Values Survey is all driven kind of from these. And to see whether we do have, we're in good time, any volunteers for a short and friendly kind of exercise on recruiting for values. Are you willing? Thank you so much. Do we have, just for gender balance, someone that would be willing to join our colleague? What is your names? Sam. Will somebody come and join Sam? Thank you so much. That is much appreciated. And your name is? Hannah. Hannah, thank you very much. Barbara, I'm going to need the mic. Oh, there we go, microphones. Okay. Hannah, we're going to start with you. Do you want to take a seat? Okay. We'll just... Now, in this role play, you are in a shop, in a bakery. I'm sorry that the screens don't work to give you the instructions, so we'll just go through this. Okay. You are in a bakery. You're working in the local bakery. Okay. You have had a very tough time of late, Hannah, I'm sorry to say, with troubles at the family, which have made things very difficult for you. Now, a month ago, you took an order for a wedding cake, a gluten-free wedding cake.
Okay.
And you forgot to put that order through to your boss.
Right.
And when the order was made. Now, the wedding is tomorrow. Now, Sam, I may have got this the wrong way round. You are the mother of the bride. And I'm calling on the acting talent of the University of Salford here. Apologies about this. You are the mother of the bride. You put the order through for a gluten-free wedding cake. The wedding of your daughter, your only daughter, is tomorrow. Now, Hannah and Sam, it's too late to do anything about this. You can't solve it. But Sam, you've come into the bakery. You want to know where the cake is. Perhaps the microphone starts with you. And would you be willing just to do a role play on this? Thank you so much.
Hi there.
Hi, welcome to my bakery.
I'm here for my daughter's wedding cake.
Right. I can only apologise. We have had a very unfortunate set of circumstances in which we are unable to fulfil your order. I am so sorry.
What do you mean?
I can only apologise. We had.
I can't have this. Her wedding is tomorrow.
I have several friends who might be able to help other bakeries in the area who I can pass your details over
no
to.
way.
But I am worried that I won't be able to. I am so sorry.
What do we do? Because I'm losing it. Do I call? What do we do?
Well,
Oh no way! I have to tell her.
okay.
She will lose her mind. No, I can't even ring her. You're gonna have to help me here.
How about a cheesecake?
I think I'm gonna have a heart attack.
You could get a big wheel of cheese from the supermarket.
We have to come to it.
I realise that this is an
breathe.
unfortunate set of circumstances.
I'm too old for this. Can't breathe. You can't do this to me.
I am so sorry. I don't really know
God.
what else to suggest. We haven't had. It's not been the easiest of times here, and we have had some issues, some administrative issues.
You cannot. You can't. I put this order through. Or it's been months.
I don't really know where to go.
So I'm
with
thinking,
this.
what do I do
I'm
after
sorry.
that?
Should we let them out their misery? Because it would have been a little bit mean to continue that, but you did fabulous. Can I have a round of applause? Sam, just stay for a minute. Sam, start with you. How did you feel about what Hannah was telling you?
I was just trying to be the mother there. But as a mother, I think I would lose my mind, if that really happened, and the wedding was tomorrow. Yeah. So I felt really. I tried to put myself in her shoes, and she would have a heart attack if she was one of those, or start to panic or cry or something like that, based on the situation that's happened. But depends on who the person is anyway.
Hannah.
I just wanted to crawl into a hole. That's sort of how I felt, even talking. And it's interesting, isn't it, when, I kind of felt like I was adopting this sort of formal, persona, when all I actually wanted to say was, I'll try and bake one right now and rustle it up really quickly for you. But not very comfortable situation.
Yeah. Well, this exercise is used as a kind of part of a mini interview rotation for recruiting GPs, recruiting doctors. And the exercise is designed to test two values. The first is self-responsibility. And the second is reflexivity or learning. And I have to say that both did brilliantly in terms of the acting. Hannah, you absolutely nailed it in terms of coming straight out from the start. And I've done this exercise so many times, and it's so often that actually the words that you said of I apologise, and you repeated that in different ways, you came straight out of it, you took responsibility, actually it comes further down the line. Oh yes, we've got that order somewhere, or oh yes, I'll just go and check with my boss, or the like. So you absolutely took responsibility in that way. That didn't make it any easier. And again, Sam's acting was fabulous. I could see David was worried about health and safety when you started kind of, channeling the kind of heart palpitations. That could really wreck University of Salford's exemplary health and safety record in lectures, at the time. But your acting was excellent on that. And in some ways, it's very easy to think, there's a way we must be able to sort it. And this is just about taking responsibility, because you want doctors to be able to take responsibility in that way. And then the second side of it is the learning. So actually, you don't fail if you didn't say the right words. And all that stuff about family troubles and the like, and having a boss, it's not really what the test is about. They're ways of giving people excuses, of looking elsewhere. Sometimes later on you use the words we. You started with I. Yeah. And I could see you just actually when we're using that word, if it was becoming corporate in that sense. Right, and isn't that difficult to be able to be a authentic human being in that kind of context and situation where you could feel his pain, I should say, sorry, as we went through. So, it may well be that actually people don't nail it in terms of the honesty, but then are they able to reflect on it? Thank you so much for your contribution to that and your comments as well. And just a thought before I, kind of turn back to David and we open it up to more kind of formal question and answer. And thank you for your contribution as well. And it made me think of a couple of things. One is that one of the goals, quite beautifully, one of the goals of the anti-apartheid movement was to allow people to have a society in which people could be fully human. That's rather wonderful. In some sense, we want businesses, I'm sure you want your business to be somewhere where people can be fully human in that sense. I mentioned my critique of the values programme at Barclays, quite apart from what the board was doing, which is another point about ownership, that actually if your values aren't what the owners are signalling, then it's very hard to continue those over time. And co-ops, of course, is all about ownership of that kind of form, but that's part of the picture as much as recruitment or building values into your supply chain or your kind of personnel policies or your kind of risk management or compliance, or the like. So the critique of Barclays that I think was a very good one was that by taking a managerial approach, the idea that values were set at the top, and to some extent they are, that leadership, authentic leadership and boards have a key role within values, no question about it. But it was a sense that values could be set at the top and then managed all the way down with targets. And one commentator said this was Barclays setting kind of sell-by dates for ethical fish rather than teaching the organisation to fish ethically. And it was a sense in relation to that of building up the capability around values. And in that, I think, a reflection that people start with a set of values. And the purpose of any business that really wants to engage staff, engage customers or suppliers, is to work with those values that are already there, to understand that people don't get out of bed in the morning to work and do a crap job, that sometimes it's the conditions that may make them less than fully human in the work that they do. So to start with that. So in a sense, you need the top, but you need a participative process as well, kind of around values. It's been a huge pleasure to give this lecture. I was a bit nervous, I have to say, I'm not an academic, but now I'm in more my comfort zone in terms of question and answer. So David, could you...